Hello, I'm Gail McManus, the founder and managing director of PER Private Equity Recruitment. So, congratulations, you've been invited for a first interview. Well, as I'm sure you already know, getting a job in private equity is more about getting the job than doing it afterwards. So, what I'm going to do today is give you some real tips and insight in how to handle that first interview. The first interview is all about fit. It's often the subjective part of the process. Later on, you're going to have to do case studies and models, but just for now, this is about whether or not you're the right sort of person to work in this team. Now remember, as a general rule, these teams are quite small. So 10, 15, 20 people maybe in the part of the business that you'll be working in. So everybody needs to know that you're going to fit right in. So fit is about a lot more than skills. Fit is about real empathy and understanding with what the company is doing and what the role is. And it's also about making sure that you feel a little bit like somebody who would work well in their organisation. So I'm going to tell you how to fit into a private equity business. So I think first of all, you'll always get asked 3 questions in the first round interview. First question is, why are you here? What do you like about us? And we'll cover that in another session. The last question is, why do you want to do private equity? And we'll cover that in a separate note. But the middle question is always, tell us about yourself, or something along those lines. And actually, they don't really want you to tell them about yourself. They want to know why you're going to be a good fit for them. Now, it's really important to realise that they probably haven't read your CV in great detail, and even if they have read it, it will have been some time ago, so they're not going to be totally up to date with all the detail. Also, as a general rule, most private equity firms or people don't really want to ask too many personal questions. So I'm going to go through a template as to how you can address that question, tell us about yourself. So what you should do first of all is start with your personal background. Answer all the questions they don't really want to ask. You know, how did you get to the country you're in? Why did you choose the academic choices that you made? How did you get your first role? So talk them through that background and tell them a little bit about why you made those choices. Then you should take your first set of work experiences, and what you should do now is use that to illustrate that you have the building blocks to do this role. That you've been trained well in financial modelling, that you've had exposure to a lot of different businesses, that you've met management teams, thought about markets and seen different scenarios. So be fairly factual during that first bit. What you then need to do is move into the piece of this conversation that is going to get you this job. My suggestion to you now is to illustrate the skills and understanding you have of the private equity role in the way that you now talk about this next part of your CV. Choose 1 or 2 projects that you've worked on. It doesn't matter whether you're an advisor, whether you're a consultant, or whether indeed it's a business that you work for now that you want to describe. But what you have to do is find 1 or 2 companies that you can talk about. And the key for you is to talk about them as if you were a private equity person. And that means focusing on what is critical in that business. So you might do things like, and I'm just going to make this up, this is totally random just by illustration. So you need to show that you understand that in private equity it's important to be able to spot the opportunity. So you might say something like, I was really pleased to be working on a consulting project with a media company. This company was in a growth phase. And it was looking at buying bolt-on acquisitions across Central and Eastern Europe. Actually, it was quite fascinating. I think there's a real opportunity in Central and Eastern Europe to consolidate smaller media businesses into things that have a much better critical mass. Now, look, I'm just making it up, but actually what I'm saying to you is, by the way you talk about businesses, you're actually showing that you understand what's important to private equity, and that is to know where there is the opportunity to invest and potentially make money. And at this stage in the conversation, you're not talking anymore about you. You're not saying I, me, I can do this, I can do that. You're illustrating your relevance for private equity in the way that you talk about business. So you might want to talk about the management team and show that you understand how important management is. So you might say something like, yes, it was fascinating seeing the CEO at work. The CEO had real charisma and a real vision for the business. But what really impressed me was how, in partnership with the CFO, who had a really deep understanding of costs, they made a great team. So you're making comments about businesses in a way that nobody is asking you to do, but actually it shows great understanding. And what's really important here is, as you start to talk about the businesses that you know something about, you will see the interviewer get engaged. Oh, so you looked at so-and-so business. We had a look at that. What did you think of it? They're going to start to ask you questions about the business, remember, now, not about you. And this is perfect. This is where you want to get the interview to, where you're engaged in a dialogue about the business, not about you. And remember, it's then the way you talk about the business that's going to be important. It's really useful to bear in mind that you need to talk like a buyer and not an advisor. Let me give you a simple example of what I mean. I met two people fairly recently. They both advised on the same transaction, but they spoke about it in different ways. The first one said, yeah, this is a fantastic business. It's going to open another 100 outlets. It'll be really profitable. We can IPO it. That's the advisor speaking. The second one said, this is an interesting business. If this management team can successfully deliver this rollout over the next 12 to 18 months, then we've probably got quite a valuable commodity. Can you see the difference? It's the same story, but told with a completely different emphasis. So make sure when you are talking about a business, you talk about it in a fairly critical or at least cynical way. I think maybe the better word is commercial, but what you're looking for is where things can go wrong. So let me give you, before I finish, my top tip for sounding like a buyer when you talk about business. Whenever you say something good about a business, put the caveat on the other end. This business is going to be able to continue to improve its gross margin, providing the oil price doesn't change any further. Remember, if you always add the providing that end to the sentence, you can say really good things about a business, providing that this or that doesn't happen. It's the easiest way to sound like a buyer. So train yourself. Every time you say something good, put the caveat on the end, and it's a simple solution to this problem. So I hope you can see that there's sort of three parts, if you like, to tell me about yourself. The first is the personal background, why you got to where you got to. The second is ticking the boxes on the technical skills. And the third thing is to talk about the businesses you know something about, like a buyer, using phraseology, terminology and tone that very much mirrors how a private equity person would look. So that's how you're going to get through your first interview. On another session, we'll talk about how to answer why private equity and how to prepare properly for why do you want to work for us.